This is the real one. All right, take it away.
You're not going to use that clap. Today, I'm going to show you how to make one skillet rotisserie chicken pot pie. This has a lot of the classic elements of a chicken pot pie, but we take two pretty serious shortcuts. One is not using chicken that you have to cook all the way through, but leaning on a store-bought rotisserie chicken. And the other is using store-bought puff pastry instead of making your own pie dough. So this all happens in one skillet. It takes about an hour start to finish. So let's do it. Here's my rotisserie chicken. I'm just going to cut it into its parts and peel off, the skin. So I'm just pulling apart the legs and the breasts. Classically, you will find onions, carrots, garlic, thyme, and peas in a chicken pot pie. I had to do a lot of soul searching when developing this recipe because, as I mentioned, we have a requirement in Basically recipes that they be 10 ingredients or less. And so every ingredient really needs to hold its own. And I personally didn't think that the carrots were holding their own in this dish at all. And I'm just not really here for overcooked, boiled, mushy carrots. I pulled a kind of controversial move and I swapped them out for turnips instead because they hold their shape better and they have a more interesting flavor. They're not just sweet mush. And I feel like it's bringing something new to the conversation. So it didn't go over super well with some of my coworkers, but I ended up taking a tally around the office of how many people were pro turnip and how many people were anti, and the turnip won. So I'm sorry to say that there's no carrots in this recipe. Sorry, not sorry. Carla was pretty appalled when she found out that the recipe made its way all the way to cross-test with turnips in it. Like, you would eat a cooked but not charred or caramelized carrot over turnip?
Yes.
It's absolutely ludicrous.
Try to change my mind.
Okay, why don't you come have a taste of this in like a half an hour? Okay, 2 medium turnips. They tend to have a kind of tough skin on them, so unfortunately we have to peel them even though they're pretty and pink. So easiest way to dice a turnip is to cut it into thick planks first. And when you get down to this wobbly part, best to just turn it on its side and cut this way so you don't risk cutting your fingers. I love a cooked turnip. These people are insane. All right, so I have 6 cloves of garlic and I'm just smashing them pretty aggressively with the side of a knife to remove the skins. And then I'm just gonna give these a rough chop. They're gonna get cooked for quite a while, so it doesn't need to be super thinly sliced or meticulous. Just breaking them down a little bit. Just going right in the bowl with the turnips. I have about a tablespoon of picked fresh thyme leaves. We'll add that in there too. But if you're someone like Tommy Werner and you just hate picking thyme, rosemary is easier to pick. Okay, let's head over to the stove and start building the filling.
Who has the time?
I have a 12-inch skillet here that I'm gonna preheat. So once my pan is preheated, I'm adding 3 tablespoons of butter, which is a very classic fat to use in a chicken pot pie. Because of how rich and creamy it is, it lends well to the sweating of all these vegetables and creating a really rich, creamy filling. So I've melted 3 tablespoons here, and I'm gonna add all of my onions and get those sweating, which means cooking gently without browning, just to soften them. There's nothing better than butter, onions, and garlic, and the smell that it gives off and the way that it tastes. These are starting to look nice and translucent, and I'm now going to add the turnip, garlic, and thyme mixture that we made, and just fold that in and let that start to soften a bit too. I'm not looking to cook these turnips all the way on the stove because they're going to spend a good amount of time in the oven ultimately, and so if they were all the way cooked through at this point, they would turn to mush in the oven. So just about 3 minutes here to kind of get the flavors all melded, and then we'll move on. Seasoning at this point now, 1 teaspoon of salt, and a good amount of black pepper as well. Oh, you know what? When this whole debacle was going down, Chris Morocco told me that his favorite kind of turnip was a daikon radish. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure daikon radish is a radish and not a turnip. So, isn't that right, Chris?
Yeah, totally.
Just talking about how...
What are we talking? What are we
You know what?
here?
We're talking about you, if I'm being honest.
I'm listening to the podcast. Why? What did I do?
You told me that your favorite kind of turnip is a friggin' daikon radish.
That's true. They just suck.
I feel like you're focusing on the wrong thing here, which is that a turnip is not a radish.
What a turnip wants to be is a daikon radish.
You're gonna taste this pie and you're gonna love these turnips. Friggin' haters. Okay, we'll have someone else taste this pie. In any case, I'm gonna sprinkle over 3 tablespoons of flour now. That is what's gonna help thicken this sauce, which is essentially a roux. So I'm cooking out that flour a little bit. So that's been cooking for a minute or so, and I'm gonna add wine now. Cooking this until the wine cooks down and the alcohol cooks off. So you can see that it's already starting to thicken. Now that the skillet's pretty dry at the bottom, as you move your spoon through it, we can add the heavy cream. And this is 2 cups of heavy cream with 1 tablespoon reserved, because we'll use that tablespoon later on to brush over the puff pastry. So just don't forget to set that aside. So now I'll add all of that pulled rotisserie chicken meat and the frozen peas. So yeah, the skillet is really full, but we're gonna top it with a crust, and that way when we scoop it out, it's a nice thick piece of pie. We're gonna bring this over to the counter and just let it cool for a couple of minutes while we roll out the puff pastry. So this is 1 package of puff pastry. So I'm gonna lightly flour the surface and then unfurl this. I want to roll this into a 13-inch square, which would mean that it will be 1 inch wider than the width of this skillet, and there can be a little bit of overhang to make a crust. This is about 13 inches wide and 9.5 inches deep, so we're gonna just roll it out a little bit this way. So the best way to get this now quite large piece of puff pastry over and onto the skillet is by curling it up onto the rolling pin really gently, and then just unfurl it over the skillet. So at this point you want to work kind of quickly because the skillet is still hot and the puff pastry will start to get pretty soft. So I'm cutting around the edge to leave a 1-inch border. You're going to fold it under to create the edge, and then we'll crimp. Okay? Kind of pressing that along the edges to even it out. And then using the tines of a fork, just crimping along the outside. And this will help hold that together. Okay, so now I have this reserved tablespoon of cream. And I'm just lightly going to brush this over the top of the pastry. That'll help with some of the golden brown coloring. It doesn't need to be thick. Before it goes in the oven, we need to cut a couple of slits in here to vent it so that steam can come out as it's cooking and the filling can cook down and it doesn't explode. And then into the 400-degree oven. The pot pie has been in the oven at 400 for about 25 minutes. And you can look in here and see that it has developed a nice golden brown all over. I also put a sheet tray underneath it to catch any bubbling that's happening. So at this point, I'm going to turn it down to 350 and let the puff pastry cook through from there. Okay, it is looking evenly golden brown. The filling has clearly thickened and you're seeing it bubble away. And I'm going to take it out of the oven. This has been out of the oven for about 15 minutes cooling, so I'm going to crack into it. And then I'm going to call all the turnip haters in the house over here and make them say they love it. Kind of sounds like creme brulee. Ooh. Oh, look! It's a turnip hater.
It's a beautiful crust.
Thank you.
Was it a pre-made pastry?
I mean, yeah.
Great.
I didn't just make puff pastry in the last hour.
I mean, it's been a blur.
Yeah, this is true. I'm just going to straight for the turnip.
Slicing and dicing.
Looks so nicely cooked.
So this is a turnip, not a potato.
Mm. Don't tell me you hate the way that tastes.
What I will say is it tastes like a turnip.
Which means it's delicious.
I wouldn't not eat it.
You'd
right?
rather that be a stupid ass carrot?
That's kind of mean to carrots.
Yeah.
I feel like.
You can relate to my feeling
I
that
just
the
don't
carrots
think
don't
that
need
a
to be there.
turnip and a carrot are subs for each other.
Oh my god, they're real veggies.
It's delicious. Beautiful browning,
Thank you.
by the way.
I'll just eat this myself.
And the sauce is perfectly seasoned.
Thank you. She loves it. She just won't admit it. Besides the fact that there aren't carrots in this dish, it is a pretty classic iteration of a pretty classic dish. Obviously, we leaned on store-bought rotisserie chicken to save time and puff pastry, which is always delicious. But other than that, it's a great chicken pot pie, and you guys need to stop hating on turnips. Today I'm going to show you how to make rotisserie chicken skillet chicken pot. What is it called? One skillet rotisserie. Ay, ay, ay.